Some people heal you by entering your life, others by leaving it. There is a silent truth most of us learn too late. Not all danger screams. Some of the most destructive forces in your life will come with a smile, a compliment, or even a helping hand. You won't feel the blow. It's too subtle for that. Instead, you'll feel tired after every conversation. You'll second-guess yourself more often. You'll carry emotions that aren't yours. And before you even realize it, you're living a life that feels unfamiliar. This is the quiet war of the psyche, one that's not fought with violence, but with emotional confusion, subtle manipulation, and unconscious projection. The battleground is your identity. The weapon is closeness. And the enemy is not always aware they're waging war. That's what makes them so dangerous. One of the few thinkers who truly grasped the depth of these psychological dynamics was Carl Jung. He understood that human relationships are not just social connections. They are exchanges of energy, emotion, and archetypal forces that shape who we become. And some people, knowingly or not, carry an energy that damages everyone it touches. These individuals don't always look dangerous. They're often intelligent, charming, or even highly respected. But beneath the surface, they operate from shadow, unconscious patterns that infect others with their inner chaos. They can make you feel responsible for their problems, guilty for your success, or paranoid without knowing why. They make you shrink, adapt, apologize. They pull you into storms that don't belong to you. Jung didn't list these people to label or condemn them. He did it to protect us, to teach us that discernment is not cruelty and boundaries are not betrayal. It's not about judging others. It's about recognizing the cost of proximity to certain kinds of unresolved pain. This video is a psychological map through the 6 most dangerous personality types you can encounter, not because they break the law, but because they break your spirit. We won't rely on superficial traits or cliches. We'll go deeper into behavior patterns, unconscious drives, and the quiet signals your nervous system has been trying to show you. These are the people that Jung warned us about, not in anger, but in wisdom. And once you see them, you'll never unsee them. They always seem to be suffering. The world is always against them. No matter the circumstances, no matter how much help they receive, they remain the victim of something, of life, of people, of systems, of fate. But if you look closer, their suffering is less about reality and more about identity. Being a victim gives them power, attention, and more importantly, a shield from responsibility. Jung observed that people who reject their own shadow, those hidden, unwanted parts of themselves, often end up projecting that darkness onto others. The eternal victim does this masterfully. They never integrate their own capacity for failure, aggression, or deceit. Instead, they see themselves as endlessly wronged and misunderstood, while the rest of the world becomes their persecutor. This kind of person is emotionally draining to be around. They require constant validation, reassurance, and emotional labor. But no matter how much you give, it will never be enough. Your support becomes a kind of fuel for their story. You might find yourself trying to solve their problems, defend their actions, or even take the blame for things you didn't do, just to keep the peace. What makes them dangerous isn't their pain, it's the way they weaponize it. The eternal victim has learned, consciously or unconsciously, that suffering can be a tool. It excuses them from growth. It deflects criticism. It manipulates others into caretaking roles, often at great emotional cost. Over time, you may begin to feel guilty for having boundaries or for pursuing your own goals. You may suppress your joy so you don't trigger their sadness. You shrink because they refuse to grow. The tragedy is that many of these individuals have genuinely been hurt. They may carry real trauma, real wounds, but instead of doing the work to heal, they become addicted to their pain. They identify with it. It becomes who they are. And if you try to help them see beyond it, you become the enemy. They'll accuse you of being unsupportive, selfish, or cold-hearted. Because the moment you stop feeding their narrative, you become a threat to it. These people often surround themselves with enablers, those who feel compelled to fix or save. They gravitate toward empaths, healers, and people with high emotional sensitivity because these individuals are more likely to stay and try harder. And that's exactly what the victim needs to maintain the illusion that the world is cruel and they are powerless. Jung believed that unexamined victimhood leads to a dangerous psychological stagnation. It prevents transformation. It blocks individuation, the process of becoming a whole, integrated self. And worse, it often drags others into its orbit. Relationships with these individuals become one-sided. Your role is to rescue them, to understand them, to absorb their pain. But there is no reciprocity, only emotional hunger. If you express your own needs, they may feel abandoned. If you assert yourself, they may accuse you of being hurtful. Over time, your empathy becomes your prison. You stay out of guilt, out of hope, out of fear of being the bad one. And in doing so, you sacrifice your own well-being on the altar of their perpetual suffering. True victims need support, compassion, and healing. But the eternal victim refuses healing, not because they can't have it, but because healing would mean letting go of the identity they've built their entire sense of self around. And that's terrifying to them, because without their story of pain, they don't know who they are. What you must remember is this: you are not responsible for carrying someone else's unresolved wounds. You can offer kindness without being consumed. You can care without becoming a casualty. And sometimes, the most loving thing you can do is walk away, not in anger, but in clarity. They come into your life like a blessing, helpful, caring, insightful. They seem to know exactly what you need, even before you say a word. At first, it feels like a miracle, someone who truly sees you, understands your struggles, and wants to lift your burdens. But soon, that help begins to feel heavy. Their generosity starts to suffocate. Their advice turns into command. And what once felt like care now feels like control. The manipulative savior is one of the most deceptive psychological threats you can encounter. Unlike overt manipulators, they don't lead with dominance or aggression. They lead with virtue, with empathy, with the appearance of moral or emotional superiority. But beneath their surface lies a deep need to be needed, an unconscious hunger to assert power under the guise of service. According to Jung's ideas, this personality type is a shadow inversion of the archetypal healer, while the healer brings genuine transformation and respects autonomy. The manipulative savior fears irrelevance. They need others to be broken so they can feel whole. They don't just offer help, they require dependence. And they'll subtly undermine your growth if it means you might no longer need them. This pattern often emerges in relationships where power dynamics are unclear. A friend who always has the answers, a partner who makes sacrifices you never asked for, a mentor who frames every disagreement as ingratitude. They may tell you, "I just want what's best for you," but somehow, best always looks like obedience to their vision. The danger of this personality lies in how slowly it tightens its grip. At first, you welcome the support. You feel safe, valued, but over time, the space to make your own decisions begins to shrink. They question your instincts, dismiss your doubts, make you second-guess your choices. And if you try to assert independence, they'll shift into guilt, martyrdom, or passive aggression. You'll hear things like, "After everything I've done for you," or "I just don't want you to make a mistake." But what they really mean is, "I need to be the one you rely on. I need to be the one who saves you." This behavior is not always conscious. In fact, many manipulative saviors genuinely believe they are acting out of love. But they are driven by unresolved parts of themselves, often rooted in childhood experiences where love had to be earned through fixing, pleasing, or rescuing others. As adults, they continue that cycle, not just to help, but to feel significant. In their presence, your autonomy slowly erodes. Your successes might be met with subtle jealousy. Your failures become their chance to step in. They may even create problems, emotional conflicts, crises, or confusion, just to remain the solution. It's a toxic loop that masquerades as care, but feeds off control. This person doesn't want your freedom, they want your dependence, and they'll wrap it in compliments, concern, and sacrifice, making it almost impossible to challenge without feeling like the ungrateful one. If you confront them, they might spiral into victimhood or outrage. They'll accuse you of being selfish, of taking them for granted, or of being influenced by others. Their ego is built on the illusion that they are indispensable. And when you threaten that illusion by becoming whole, they panic. True help empowers. It gives you the tools to grow and then steps back. It doesn't hover. It doesn't remind you constantly of the help it gave. It doesn't expect obedience in return. But the manipulative savior cannot let go, because without you, they have no purpose. The cost of staying close to someone like this is subtle but severe. You lose your voice, your instincts, your confidence. You begin to outsource your decisions, not because you're incapable, but because you've been conditioned to believe that someone else always knows better. The most dangerous part, it feels like love. It feels like safety, but it's not. It's a transaction disguised as devotion. Freedom doesn't always come with open conflict. Sometimes it comes in the quiet decision to stop accepting the help that comes with strings, to stop playing the role of the broken one in someone else's story of heroism. You don't owe your life to anyone who tries to own it. There are people who don't just affect your life, they reflect it. Being around them is like standing in front of a distorted mirror. You see something familiar, but it's warped, exaggerated, uncomfortable. They provoke you, trigger you, stir up emotions you didn't know were still alive. And what makes them dangerous isn't just what they show you, it's what they awaken inside you. The shadow mirror doesn't attack you directly. They don't insult you, betray you, or cause obvious harm. But somehow, you leave interactions with them feeling unsettled, irritated, even ashamed. You might blame yourself, or worse, you might not even understand why you feel that way. These individuals carry unintegrated parts of themselves, their shadow, and unconsciously provoke the unintegrated parts of you. In Jungian psychology, the shadow is the collection of all the traits, instincts, desires, and emotions we suppress because they don't fit our self-image. We think we've buried them, but they're alive. And when someone comes along who embodies what we've denied, it triggers an intense reaction. The shadow mirror may embody something you repress: assertiveness, desire, selfishness, rage, ambition, sensuality, chaos. They reflect the traits you've disowned, either because society taught you they were wrong, or because your upbringing made them unsafe to express. Instead of acknowledging those qualities within, it feels easier to project discomfort onto the other person. You might feel drawn to them, but also repelled. You might criticize them, envy them, imitate them in secret, or try to fix them. But the truth is, the discomfort is not entirely about them. It's about you. And that's what makes the shadow mirror so destabilizing. They expose the gap between who you are and who you pretend to be. But here's where the danger lies. If you're unaware of this dynamic, your psyche will twist itself into knots to defend your self-image. You'll demonize the shadow mirror. You'll turn them into the villain, accuse them of things they never did, or emotionally exile them without understanding why. Alternatively, you may become obsessively attached, trying to merge with the part of yourself you see in them, losing boundaries, logic, and self-respect in the process. The shadow mirror is not inherently toxic, but the relationship becomes toxic when it's unconscious. When you can't see the projection, when you try to eliminate the discomfort by eliminating the person, or when you cling to them hoping they'll complete a part of you you've abandoned. This dynamic is often present in intense friendships, mentor-student relationships, or short-lived romantic entanglements. There's a magnetic pull, fueled not by true connection, but by psychological compensation. You're not in love with them. You're in love with the part of yourself they reflect. And when that reflection fades, so does the fascination. For the shadow mirror, this process is usually confusing. They may feel misunderstood, judged, or idolized for reasons they can't quite explain. And if they're unaware of the effect they have, they may unknowingly repeat this pattern with many people, stirring up old wounds like a walking mirror people are desperate to avoid or possess. The only way to escape the trap is self-awareness, to recognize when someone is provoking not your logic, but your shadow. To ask, what part of me is being reflected here? Is it envy, repressed anger, longing, insecurity? Once you name it, you can own it. And once you own it, the mirror loses its power. This type of person forces you to confront the uncomfortable truth that what you reject in others often lives quietly inside you. And until you make peace with your shadow, you will keep attracting those who carry it for you. The shadow mirror doesn't need to be destroyed. They need to be seen for what they are: a signal, a psychological invitation, a chance to integrate the pieces of yourself you left behind. But that process is painful, and most people run from pain. They rarely show their hand. On the surface, they may seem supportive, interested, even impressed by your growth. They ask questions about your goals, offer polite compliments, and might even cheer when something good happens to you. But behind their smile, there's tension. In their silence, there's resentment. And beneath the congratulations, there's a subtle desire to see you fall. The envious saboteur is not always loud, nor obviously aggressive. Their weapon is not confrontation, it's corrosion. A slow, quiet erosion of your confidence, your clarity, and your joy. You may never hear them say, "I hope you fail," but you'll feel it in the way they respond to your success, with dismissiveness, faint praise, or carefully masked discomfort. Envy, in Jungian terms, is not merely wanting what others have. It's the inability to celebrate others because it reminds you of your own unlived potential. It's the internal wound that turns someone else's light into a mirror of your darkness. And when that envy festers, it doesn't just sit in silence. It seeks to level the playing field, even if that means tearing others down. The envious saboteur often doesn't act out in obvious ways. Their strategies are subtle. They might plant doubt by questioning your decisions at key moments. They might frame their criticism as just being honest, while injecting anxiety into your progress. They may remind you of your past mistakes, just when you're about to make a leap forward. And they always seem to know how to make you second-guess what once felt clear. This type of person thrives on proximity. They want access to your journey, not to support it, but to monitor it, to keep you close enough to influence, but never far enough to thrive independently. Because if you grow too far beyond them, they lose their emotional leverage. They no longer have a front row seat to your life, and that, to them, feels unbearable. You may notice that your energy feels off after speaking with them. You downplay your achievements, avoid sharing good news, or feel the need to balance your happiness with humility or apology. You shrink, not because they asked you to, but because they trained you to believe that being fully alive makes others uncomfortable. This dynamic is especially dangerous because it hides behind the mask of friendship, family loyalty, or long-standing connection. You tell yourself they care, that you're imagining things, that it's just your insecurity talking, but your nervous system knows, it always does, and the body keeps score. The envious saboteur is often in deep denial about their own feelings. They may see themselves as loyal, generous, or even humble, but their unresolved jealousy leaks into their behavior. They might gossip behind your back, withhold support when it's needed most, or become mysteriously unavailable during your most important moments. Their absence is never explained, but always felt. Some may ask, isn't envy a natural human emotion? Yes, it is. But what separates this person is their refusal to acknowledge it and their tendency to act it out rather than process it. Instead of turning envy into motivation, they externalize it as sabotage. They punish others for doing what they haven't allowed themselves to do. In relationships, this becomes a cycle of undermining. You feel the need to prove your worth, to constantly reassure them, to downplay your dreams so they don't feel threatened. But no amount of shrinking will make them love you more. Because their pain isn't about you, it's about their own abandoned desires. The only escape is truth. Radical, painful, liberating truth. To name what's happening, to stop justifying their behavior, to stop contorting yourself to protect someone else's ego. And sometimes that means creating space, not in anger, not in revenge, but in peace. Because not everyone can witness your evolution and remain whole. Success doesn't just test your ability to rise, it tests others' ability to rise with you. And some will fail that test, not because you changed, but because they didn't. They walk into the room and change the atmosphere. Their presence demands attention, not by force, but by magnetism. They're charming, articulate, confident. They often possess a kind of effortless authority that makes people want to follow them, listen to them, admire them. At first, they seem like visionaries, leaders, creators of meaning and movement, but time reveals the cracks in their brilliance. Beneath the charm lies a deep void, one that devours admiration, loyalty, and energy without ever being satisfied. The charismatic narcissist is among the most dangerous personality types, not because they hurt openly, but because they disguise their hunger as inspiration. They don't control through fear, they control through fascination. And before you know it, you're not just following them, you're orbiting them. Your decisions, emotions, and even your sense of self begin to revolve around their image. Unlike overt abusers, this type doesn't need to raise their voice. They guide with subtle dominance, rewarding those who mirror their beliefs and slowly sidelining those who don't. They are often successful or talented, which only adds to their credibility. But their greatest skill is storytelling, not the kind that entertains, but the kind that weaves a psychological web. They make themselves the hero, the genius, the misunderstood rebel. And you're either part of the story, or you're the antagonist. Jung's insights into the persona, the mask we wear to navigate society, are key to understanding this type. The charismatic narcissist builds an exquisite persona, one that's tailored to seduce, inspire, or manipulate. But behind the mask is a fragile self, often built on wounds of inadequacy and shame. The narcissism is a defense, a fortress built around a child who was never fully seen. But instead of healing, they construct an identity so seductive that others willingly validate it again and again. This validation becomes a drug. The more they receive, the more they crave. And when someone threatens the supply by disagreeing, shining independently, or setting boundaries, they react, not always with rage, sometimes with silence, with withdrawal, with a carefully constructed smear campaign cloaked in concern. The message is always the same. If you are not for them, you are against them. Being close to someone like this feels, at first, like being chosen, like being seen in a way no one else has seen you. But eventually, the cost emerges. Your needs become interruptions, your boundaries, insults. Your presence is valued only in how well it reflects their light. You stop being a person and start being a mirror. And when you break the mirror, when you say no, when you stop applauding, the punishment is swift. You may be discarded, devalued, or quietly erased from their narrative. Others may be recruited to replace you and to believe a version of events where you were the problem all along. This isn't just emotional cruelty, it's psychological theft. The charismatic narcissist doesn't just want attention, they want identity. They want your sense of self to merge with theirs. And the longer you stay, the more you lose your own reflection. Not all charm is manipulation. Not all confidence is a mask. But when the spotlight is always on them, when your voice feels smaller in their presence, when love starts to feel like performance, you need to ask yourself who you're really becoming. The hardest part is leaving, because these individuals know how to create emotional dependency. They make you feel special, chosen, elevated, and walking away feels like walking out of the light. But it's not the light, it's a projection, one designed to keep you orbiting, something that will never reflect your true self back to you. What they fear most is not rejection, it's irrelevance. And your freedom is the thing that renders them powerless. There's a certain peace that comes not from avoiding pain, but from understanding it. The people we've explored aren't just characters to avoid, they're invitations to awareness. They teach us what we tolerate, what we attract, and what we've been taught to believe we deserve. In some cases, they reflect parts of us we haven't healed. In others, they challenge the limits we've failed to enforce. Not all danger wears a mask of cruelty. Sometimes it looks like care, intelligence, or even love. And that's why it's so important to see clearly. Not with suspicion, but with discernment. You are not obligated to stay in dynamics that confuse your soul. You are not cruel for protecting your peace. You are not selfish for choosing growth over comfort or distance over dysfunction. The deepest self-respect doesn't come from confrontation. It comes from refusal. Refusal to carry what isn't yours. Refusal to perform a role you never agreed to play. Refusal to lose yourself just to keep someone else from falling apart. There will always be those who test your center, who press against your wounds to see if you'll break. But you don't need to fight them. You only need to remember who you are when they're not around. Your clarity is your defense. Your awareness is your freedom. Your boundaries are not walls. They are declarations of what is sacred. Honor them.